The story of human suffering begins with a subtle trance. Not the kind performed on a stage, but the silent hypnosis of emotion. The moment you react, the moment you tense, the moment someone's tone, glance, or word pierces your calm and takes possession of your awareness. In that instant, you are no longer yourself. You have become the reflection of another will. It happens everywhere. In politics, in romance, in religion, in the hunger that leads your hand to the fridge at midnight. The mind is constantly being conditioned, not by force, but by feeling. Every emotional response, anger, guilt, lust, fear, is a small surrender, a tiny moment where the divine observer within us falls asleep and the body, with all its cravings, takes command. Roy Masters once said that the devil's tool is irritation. Not violence, not temptation itself, but the irritation that makes you lose your stillness. Because the moment you lose that stillness, you can be shaped. And the shaping begins in childhood. A parent's manipulation, a teacher's humiliation, a lover's control, all seed the same reflex, the need to please or the need to resist. Two faces of the same coin, appeasement and anger, submission and rebellion. Each reaction deepens the trance. You begin to think these reactions are you. You think your desires are natural, that your anger is justified, that your pleasures are expressions of freedom. But in truth, they are the programming of the world, the echo of every emotional exchange that ever bypassed your awareness. Think of temptation not as an invitation to evil, but as a test of consciousness. The real battle is not between good and evil. It is between awareness and reaction. Every time you react, you are hypnotized a little more deeply into the dream of matter, into the story of your own cravings. Let's take something as simple as food. The impulse to eat when you are not hungry is the body trying to fill an emptiness that is not physical. You are feeding a spiritual hunger with material substitutes, and the more you feed it, the hungrier it becomes. Because the soul cannot be nourished by what is perishable. So the addiction grows, not because you lack willpower, but because you are asleep in the trance of emotion. Now look at sex, not as pleasure, not as sin, but as a mirror of spiritual energy. When that energy awakens in an unredeemed mind, it becomes obsession. Desire replaces connection, and the sacred becomes mechanical. The body consumes what the soul cannot digest. You might ask, why does it feel so powerful? Why does temptation seem irresistible? Because it mimics the divine. The thrill of lust, the satisfaction of food, the rush of anger, all counterfeit versions of the same lost union with the source. They are imitations of the ecstasy of presence, of the peace we once knew before we became divided within ourselves. The world calls this life, but it is a rehearsal of death, a slow decay into dependence. There is only one way out: awareness, the quiet seeing of what is, without judgment, without indulgence, without resistance. To see the pull without following it. To feel the anger rise without feeding it. To watch the desire move without being moved. This is the beginning of redemption, not through effort, but through awakening. The moment you become aware, the hypnosis weakens. The tempter loses his leverage, and the same energy that once enslaved you becomes the fire of liberation. But few want that kind of freedom. Because freedom means dying to everything you've ever called me. It means realizing that most of your personality is just reaction, the echo of other people's intentions living through you. Look around. Humanity is addicted to its own emotions. We wear our wounds as identity. We mistake our cravings for love, our guilt for morality, our submission for peace. We confuse comfort with truth, and so we build systems, religious, political, sexual, that reinforce the very sleep we're trying to wake from. The hypnotist doesn't always have a swinging watch. Sometimes he wears a suit, or stands on a pulpit, or whispers in the voice of your own thoughts. The suggestion is always the same. React. React to what you see, to what you hear, to what you desire. lose your center. And once you do, the manipulation is complete. To awaken, you must first see that the manipulation exists. You must see that anger and appeasement are not opposites, they are partners. Every time you get angry, you give your energy away. Every time you appease, you sell your soul for temporary peace. Both are forms of spiritual prostitution. So what does it mean to truly love? Not the emotional intoxication we call love, but something higher. A love that observes, that does not need, that does not demand. The love that simply is. When you find that still love within, all the world's hypnosis begins to dissolve. Food loses its spell. Sex becomes sacred again. Power loses its fascination. Because you no longer need to be filled, you are full. In that fullness, even suffering changes. It becomes light. It becomes teaching. You no longer resist it because resistance itself is part of the trance. You begin to see life not as a sequence of battles, but as a great unmasking, a revelation of what is real beneath what reacts. You were never meant to live enslaved by emotion. You were meant to feel, but not be ruled by feeling. You were meant to think, but not be trapped by thought. You were meant to experience desire, but not to be possessed by it. The tragedy of humanity is not sin. It is unconsciousness. Every compulsion, every addiction, every obsession is an echo of that original sleep. The fruit we ate was not evil. It was the taste of reaction. The knowledge of good and evil is the knowledge of opposites, of polarity, of endless conflict between desire and guilt. To awaken is to step beyond that knowledge, to return to simple seeing. The masters of old knew this. Buddha called it mindfulness. Christ called it forgiveness. Lao Tzu called it the way. Roy Masters called it objectivity. The words differ, but the truth is one. Stop reacting, and you stop sinning. Awareness is the only true prayer. Every hypnosis requires two roles, the tempter and the tempted. The tempter provokes emotion. The tempted reacts. The provocation can be as small as a sigh, a silence, a withheld glance. It says, I control how you feel. And if you believe it, if you accept that your state depends on another's tone or approval, you have surrendered your inner kingdom. From that moment on, the world owns your mood. You are at the mercy of praise and rejection. You eat when comfort calls. You ache when attention fades. And you mistake every emotional surge for evidence that you are alive. But aliveness is not emotion. Aliveness is awareness. This is why children are so easily captured. They are born radiant and undefended. But the first scolding, the first humiliation, the first manipulative kindness plants the seed of confusion. If I please, I am loved. If I resist, I am punished. And from that seed grows an entire civilization addicted to reaction. Most of our culture runs on this economy of emotion. Advertising sells irritation and relief. Politics sells fear and belonging. Religion sells guilt and forgiveness. The cycle is perfect because it never ends. Each half feeds the other. The very cure is made of the same poison, yet awareness cuts through it in a single instant. To see manipulation as it happens, without anger, without appeasement, is to break the spell. The hypnotist depends on your reaction. Without it, his power dissolves into air. The miracle is that you don't need to fight your habits, you only need to watch them. When you eat unconsciously, notice it. When you reach for your phone, notice it. When desire floods your body, notice it. The noticing itself is the undoing, because the light of awareness burns through every shadow it touches. But the ego resists that light. It whispers, think about it later. It says, you already understand. Understanding is not awakening. You can read every scripture, quote every philosopher, and still live as a slave of impulse. Real freedom begins when you observe the impulse before it takes you. The greatest illusion is that we can manage our addictions by willpower. But willpower belongs to the same mind that created the addiction. The true will arises only in stillness, in that silent witness behind thought, the one untouched by temptation. It is not effort, it is presence. That presence feels like humility. Not humiliation, but sacred humbleness, a quiet strength that refuses both pride and despair. When you live from that center, you can look at your cravings without shame, your anger without justification, your fears without resistance. They dissolve in the gaze of what is real. The devil, if he exists, is nothing more than reaction itself. Every time you are irritated, you have already agreed to his terms. And every time you see irritation clearly without becoming it, you have undone the agreement. Temptation is not a curse. It is an alchemical invitation. Each pull of desire exposes where you are still asleep. Each surge of anger shows where you are still identified with form. Without temptation, there would be no awakening, because we would never see what controls us. The same energy that fuels lust can become the fire of love. The same appetite that seeks food can become hunger for truth. The same anger that destroys can become courage. Transformation does not require suppression, it requires awareness. The poison becomes medicine when it is seen. In the ancient temples, initiates were never told to flee desire. They were told to behold it without trembling. The serpent was sacred because it symbolized energy, rising through awareness instead of falling through indulgence. When consciousness meets instinct without shame, heaven and earth reconcile within the human heart. But the world has forgotten this art. We split spirit from body, purity from pleasure, and then wonder why we are torn. The saints starve, the sinners feast, and both remain asleep in different dreams of the same trance. To redeem the body is to bring consciousness into it, not to deny its sensations but to feel them fully, without ownership. To eat when hungry, to love without control, to breathe without guilt. The ordinary acts of life become sacred when they are done in presence. Imagine eating in silence, aware of every texture, every scent, every movement of your hand. In that attention, the meal ceases to be an escape and becomes communion. Imagine intimacy free from need, a meeting of beings rather than bodies. Such moments restore what was lost in the fall, the union of awareness and form. This is why anger is such a powerful teacher. It shows you where love has not yet entered. Anger is a signal, not a sin. When you feel it and do not act from it, it turns into clarity, the sword that cuts through illusion. Forgiveness, then, is not an act of moral virtue. It is the natural consequence of seeing truly. When you understand the mechanism of hypnosis, you stop blaming the hypnotist. You see that everyone who has ever hurt you was themselves reacting from an ancient chain of manipulation. You break the chain by refusing to react back. The world changes not when we revolt, but when we wake. Because awareness is the only revolution that leaves no victims. At the heart of every spiritual path lies one secret: stillness. Stillness is not the absence of movement, it is the absence of compulsion. It is the space in which thought appears and disappears without consequence. It is what remains when the mind exhausts every strategy and finally surrenders to the moment. When you practice awareness, call it meditation, observation, prayer, you begin to glimpse this stillness. At first it feels fragile, easily broken by noise or memory, but as you rest in it, the storms of emotion pass through without touching you. You become the calm eye within the hurricane of human drama. In that calm, the illusions of power and pleasure fade. Food tastes simpler, sex becomes tender, the need to argue evaporates. You no longer chase highs because you have remembered the quiet ecstasy of being. To live this way is not withdrawal from life, it is entrance into it. Every gesture becomes precise, every word carries weight. Every breath feels earned. You start to notice beauty in the ordinary, the way light falls on a wall, the sound of footsteps, the warmth of a stranger's glance. Existence becomes a continuous act of worship. From this awareness, compassion arises naturally. Not pity, but understanding. You see the asleep ones, reacting, hurting, craving, and you no longer despise them, because you recognize your former self in them. You know that behind every manipulation is fear, and behind every fear is longing for the divine. When awareness stabilizes, even death loses its threat, because what dies was never you. What lives through all births and endings is the same still witness that has watched every thought since time began. To realize this is to end the hypnosis of mortality. So the journey that began with temptation ends in freedom, not by fighting desire, but by seeing through it. Not by condemning the body, but by awakening within it. The snake that once deceived now guards the tree of life. And as you walk through the world awake, you discover a strange truth. Evil has no substance of its own. It survives only in reaction. When there is no reaction, it disappears like mist in sunlight. This is what the mystics meant by redemption. Not the reward of a distant heaven, but the restoration of innocence here and now. To see without judging, to act without motive, to live without fear. The eternal child returns, wiser now, but uncorrupted. Awareness is the undoing of hypnosis. Love is the natural state that follows. Be still, and you will remember who you are.